I want to stand up and support Bill C-45, not because of ideology, not because of my belief and my presumption and my assumption, but because it is an evidence-based piece of legislation. When you look at what is going on in Europe and in other countries, and you look at the evidence where they have decriminalized or legalized marijuana, you see that, in fact, consumption has gone down. I think this bill is extremely important. This bill is, and the police do not spend their time picking up people who are smoking a joint on the street. They go after organized crime. They go after people who are selling heroin on the street. Now, Mr. Speaker, why is this an important bill? The UNICEF did a study in 2015 that showed that Canada has the highest number of youth who have access to and who smoke cannabis. At the same time, that same UNICEF study showed that Canada has the lowest number of youth using cigarettes and having access to cigarettes. Now, what is the difference between cannabis and cigarettes? Cigarettes are, in fact, illegal. Alcohol is legal. What do cigarettes and alcohol and cannabis have in common? They're psychoactive drugs. They have an effect on your behavior. They have an effect on a lot of things you do. But I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, that the legal drug tobacco is the only thing that, when used exactly as directed, would make you sick and kill you. Okay? But yet it's legal. And it's being sold in this country. And we're looking at the packaging of that. We have brought down smoking to the lowest in the OECD for cigarettes because we have taken steps to look at packaging. We have taken steps to ensure that it is not sold to people under the age of 18. And so this is what we're trying to do. Because when we have the highest access in the OECD by our young people to cannabis, it means that they're getting it. And they're getting it illegally. And they're getting it from street pushers and street users, whom you cannot moderate. We don't want people to have to buy substances that have an impact on you from the street dealer. Because we had an opportunity to deal with opiates and we did not under the last government, we see that now the dealers who are selling opiates on the street are lacing it with fentanyl. And they're lacing it with carfentanil. They don't care about quality control. They don't care about the potency of what they're selling. They don't care about any of those things. They just care about selling. And if people die, who cares? We're suggesting that we want to keep this drug out of the hands of our young people. Why young people specifically? Because if we regulate this drug, we legalize it and regulate it, we know that young people have not had their frontal lobes fully developed. And we know that cannabis has an impact on cognitive behavior and therefore on the frontal lobe. So we don't want them to use cannabis. Let us look at the three drugs that are psychoactive, that are two of which are legal at the moment. We have prohibitions for the sale of alcohol. We have prohibitions for the sale of tobacco. We know that tobacco causes disease and they kill. I don't know of any particular medical properties that tobacco brings to anybody. So there are no benefits for using tobacco. There are only side effects. Let us look at alcohol. Well, we've heard arguments that if you drink a glass of red wine every day, it would help you, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the jury's out on that, but there are still some medicinal benefits, one would say, for alcohol. But there are negative benefits. MADD will tell you that, in fact, the largest number of motor vehicle accidents in this country come from drunk drivers. So we have had to legalize it, ensure that young people don't get a hold of it, look at tracking who drinks it, make sure that we set very clear guidelines for what the level of alcohol should be if you're driving, etc. Now, cannabis does have medicinal properties. We know that it is used for pain. We know that it is used for chronic disease. We know that it brings down levels of anxiety. We also know that it is used in certain amounts. The cannabis oil is used for people with epilepsy. So we know that there are medicinal properties, but like anything that has effects, good effects, there are side effects. What we know is that these side effects impact youth more than anybody else, and we do not want youth to have access to it. So we're doing what we successfully did with alcohol and with tobacco to ensure that young people do not get hold of them. Why do we have the lowest number of people smoking cigarettes in this country? Because it's legal and it's regulated, and we're ensuring that young people cannot buy it. And we have very clear penalties and guidelines for anyone who sells it to young people. Very clear. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars in penalties. Now, So this is the reason why this bill is important. But what this bill also does, it authorizes, just like we do with cigarettes and just like we do with alcohol, who is allowed to sell. And if you are an unauthorized seller, i.e. a street dealer, then you have penalties that are coming at you, especially if you sell to youth, of 14 years. If you use a young person at all in this legislation, you use a young person to sell cannabis on the street, it's a 14-year penalty to people who are using young people in that manner. We will be tracking this. Like MADD, we will be able to educate people about the use of cannabis, of what the dangers of cannabis are, and we will be able to track who buys it and who doesn't buy it, and we will be able to ensure that we're keeping pace with what's going on. We have all sorts of penalties that are going to be available to people who are using it underage or who are selling it to people underage, or anybody who is an unauthorized seller. So this is about evidence-based information. This picks up evidence in other countries. It sees what's happened. It looks at our own country and the sale of alcohol and the sale of cigarettes, and it says, what is it that we didn't do? We are not doing anything. The level of young people, I think 51% of young people are using cannabis in this country. That level is going up and up. So whatever we are doing or not doing right now is not working. When we have the highest level, and I want to harp on this, the highest level of young people in the OECD having access to and using cannabis, then we are not doing anything right. Let's get it right. Let's look at our own evidence in Canada with regard to the sale of cigarettes and the sale of alcohol, and let us look at European studies and European results from this same legislation, and let us say that we are using evidence-based information to stop cannabis from getting into the hands of our young people who are particularly susceptible because of the cognitive impact of cannabis on them. And so when I listen to people saying we presume this is going to happen, we put money in the 2017 budget just for a public awareness campaign. We put money in the 2017 campaign budget just to make sure that we have all the money we need for the tools that we need to do. We're training police to look at how you test for levels of impairment if you are driving with cannabis. I can tell you as a physician that I don't know very many people who were caught impaired with cannabis. You're going to have to smoke a lot of cannabis to get to the level where you're impaired. And that means you're going to fall asleep on the wheel before you even turn on the ignition in the car, because we know what cannabis does. And so what I'm saying is that we need to do this because it is absolutely important to prevent our youth from getting access to a drug that impairs their cognitive ability when their frontal lobes have not completely developed. This is important. We need to authorize who sells it, just like we do with those other drugs I'm talking about, and we need to be able to have clear penalties to deal with their use. So this is clear. I don't understand what the debate is about here. This is an easy thing to understand. There is a problem, there is evidence on how to deal with the problem. It shows success in other kinds of drugs that we've legalized. It's a fait accompli. It is simple, and that is what we're trying to do. We're trying to get the simple thing, not allow for cannabis to be in the hands of our youth. And the only way we can do it is to legalize it and regulate it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.